Greetings, Race community. Brent coming in live with today's guest, Scott Rabenold, who serves as Senior Vice President for University Advancement at the University of Southern California. Welcome, Scott.
Great, Brent. Thank you. It's great to see you again.
Likewise, it has been some time. I've had the opportunity to connect with Scott periodically over the years, most frequently when he was leading development at the University of Texas at Austin. I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit. But first, I want to go back in time a bit to Montezuma High School in Iowa.
Yeah.
And I want to know about that, Scott. What was he into and what led you to the University of Iowa?
Sure. So grew up in an incredibly small town in Iowa, Brent, that you can appreciate. As I tell people, it's crazy to think I grew up in a town where I had to drive 30 minutes for fast food to now living in Los Angeles. But grew up in a great community, Montezuma, Iowa, and my dad was the high school basketball coach there. And knowing how important basketball was to him, I was around the game so much. And that became, the high school kids when I was in elementary or middle school, right? Those were my idols. And so getting a chance to play basketball and really be a part of a community there, worked on a craft, really learned about how to work as a team, work with others, build a skill set, put in the hours, and a lot of skills that both created a great pathway for me in the future, but also brought me great memories. And I know one of those is probably 1990 when we both found ourselves in Des Moines.
Yeah, so this is a fun fact. As some of my listeners know, especially the ones that are tired of hearing me talk about Iowa, one of the things you do when you grow up in Iowa, especially if you're from small town Iowa, is there is real pride in like whose town is the smallest, whose graduating class was smaller. And I can say that the town I grew up near has about 2,500 people, no stoplights, no fast food, no movie theater. But Scottstown, as of the 2020 census, had 1,400 people. So he wins the smaller town award in today's battle of the Iowans.
That's right. But both great communities in Iowa.
So what was like the nearest town you would go to on Friday nights to like watch a movie or, do things people do in normal society?
Yeah. Well, as kids from the 90s will remember you like to go and cruise, right? Drive your car real slow and look at people in the other car. And we'd have to drive to Oskaloosa, 30 miles away, to be able to be in a group that had enough cars to actually cruise. And so that's Oskaloosa was if you could go there and get pizza, movie, and cruise, that was a big time Friday or Saturday night. Of course, in Iowa, Friday night football game or Friday night basketball game was the first draw, but that was Saturday night usually.
Well, we would go and cruise in a town called Decorah, which is the Oskaloosa of Northeast Iowa. And with that, I'm going to stop it because we've probably already lost most listeners, although some are super engaged who grew up in small towns in Iowa. Okay, so 1990, we both are in Des Moines at the same basketball game because my high school is playing your high school. Who won that game, Scott?
Yeah, I think Montezuma squeaked it out. Yeah, Montezuma had an unbelievable season, went undefeated, and I deserve none of the credit. I was this really skinny. I was about the same height, and I won't tell you how many pounds lighter, but a significant number of pounds lighter than I find myself today. But we had unbelievable leaders on that team that were really talented, guys like Jamie Arndt and Rich Greif, who I still look up to this day.
And so tell me about the path to Iowa. Was basketball a part of it? Did you have aspirations around college sports early on, given the childhood you described?
Yeah. Like a lot of kids, I grew up wanting to play big time college athletics, and in particular, being from Iowa, I wanted to play at the University of Iowa. But I found myself, those schools weren't looking at me, and so after my senior year of basketball season ended, I drove to Iowa City, went to Iowa's basketball practice, and Tom Davis was great. He said, "Scott, I can promise you a spot on the team, but I can't promise you a minute of playing time. But I can promise you'll be in practice every day and have an opportunity." And Brent, what I found was the skill level to be at that is really unique. And so while I was willing to put in the time, God gave me a lot of skills, but he didn't give me the body to play in the Big Ten. As I tell people, not only was I too short, but I was too slow. And that's a really bad combination. But I had great friends to this day. I literally was on the phone this morning with Jason Bauer, who was a teammate of mine. I text with Jess Settles. I saw Ryan Bowen in July in Las Vegas. That was my fraternity. And they were great to me. That was a great group of friends. And Tom Davis was, if you think of him as a gentleman, and as a as a real man, a real leader, he's even better than you might believe. He's exceptional. And when I took this job, he wrote me a handwritten note congratulating me on getting a big time job and how proud he was. And for him to do that, that meant the world to me. And so that's how impactful my college experience was.
I mean, that is amazing to hear. And it also just strikes me, how does Tom Davis do that? Keep track of that. I mean, that is not some app he's got in his phone that makes that happen. And to think about the number of players that coaches like Tom Davis have, mentored over the years. I mean, talk about stewardship. I mean, that's just amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's a statement about leadership, right? You mentioned stewardship. It's a statement on leadership. When you lead people, you care about them, and you want them to exceed and excel. It's also a story about having great people around you, because I'm 100% confident that John Streif, who is a famous Iowa athletic trainer, is probably the one that told Coach Davis about it and made sure Coach had my mailing address. And so, those sort of things are great examples of the leaders that I've had a chance to be around, servant leaders, quality people that helped shape my career today. So, whether it was my father, whether it was Tom Davis, whether it was John Streif, those people have impacted me in different ways and have helped me be in the position I'm in today, without a doubt.
Thank you for sharing, Scott. And for people listening, I'm getting chills because these are people that I grew up like watching on TV and idolizing, frankly. So it's just really special to have such a authentic window into Scott's experience here. And I am curious, when you were advancing through as a student athlete, my understanding is your sort of first career path was at the intersection of sort of the business of college sports, if you will. But you also pursued your MBA on the other side of I-80 at Drake University. Who inspired you to even, because it's not that common to go and pursue your MBA right out of college. So somebody must have made that recommendation for you.
Yeah. Yeah. So while I was at Iowa, I really thought that I wanted to come there and be the next Tom Davis, Andy Enfield, Rick Barnes, right? Like whoever you want to say, that's a great basketball coach. But what I realized in college quickly as an 18, 19-year-old was that the pathway forward wasn't one that aligned with what I wanted to be as a person, where I wanted to spend time as a father. And so I started seeing that. So I wanted to make a pivot to athletic administration. I wanted to be an athletic director. In a moment of where I had probably more confidence than I probably should, I went to Bob Bowlesby and said, I've decided, Bob Bowlesby, when you retire, and of course at the time he was Mr. Bowlesby to me, Mr. Bowlesby, when you retire, I want to take your seat. I want to be that next athletic director at Iowa. I literally, Brent, handed him a legal pad and said, so show me the pathway. And he handed the piece of paper back to me very, very kindly, and then laid out a pathway for me. And one of those was to get an MBA. And so that's kind of what started me down that path. He helped me get my first job at Wake Forest. I don't get that job without him opening doors. And he was instrumental in a lot of my first few career stops, and always a great mentor. My first Texas OU game in Dallas, I went to it. I saw him down on the edge of the field. I walked down. He turned around, hollered at me. And so for a guy, that'd been 15 years since I'd really interacted with him face to face, to still be invested in my career and come talk to me meant a lot to me.
That's amazing. How it also makes me wonder how many people should walk up to somebody with that notepad and ask for the path.
Yeah. Yeah.
He could have put other things on it, and you likely would have followed him because you trusted him and you saw, relevancy and expertise and mentorship. And it's so, I mean, it's amazing that he turned it back to you like that. But it does make me wonder, what might happen if more people just clearly put their career aspirations on the table like that. Not saying I want your job right now or I want a promotion right now, but help me shape the path.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that we often wonder about leaders is how they got there. And I don't think there's any doubt they got there because they had good mentoring and coaching. And so, when I was 20 to 30 years old, Bob Bowlesby was instrumental. But if I look at the next 10 years, Tom Mitchell and Rhea Turtletop had a huge impact on me. And the fact that Rhea would take my phone call when she hardly knew me, but helped me through scenarios. In fact, Tom Mitchell, another guy from rural Iowa, New Sharon, Iowa, who maybe from the smallest hometown, Tom was great to me and always helpful. And so knowing that you have mentors that can help you is so important. And so that's why I try to help people out. That's why I try to take the phone calls. I try to set up the calls with people that want to learn about the profession, because if they're truly eager and learning on how to be a better leader, how to serve their universities better, and how to grow their career, I want to help because I know that's how I've advanced.
We're going to put a bow on the basketball chapter of this conversation. But before we do, I have to ask, single greatest moment in all of your experience around basketball, college sports, high school sports, what stands out for you?
Oh boy, I had a lot of them. Winning a state championship, even though I was a scrawny freshman, clearly was special. One that I probably smile and laugh about still the most is Iowa versus Purdue. I'm a senior. It's a big game. My recollection, both teams, Purdue in particular, ranked in the top 10, and we beat them, just absolutely spanked them. I got in for less than 10 seconds. Place was still rocking, and threw the ball in. They threw it right back into me. I nailed a 22-footer. The place went crazy. And I still get chills about that because I hit a big shot against a highly ranked team. And what I just remember is how great the crowd was, how great my teammates were. And, if I could pull up that clip, you would see the joy for me and my teammates and the fans. And that was special.
Do you have that clip? That's like my Friday morning hype clip if I'm you.
My parents have that clip at the house on a VHS tape, right? So I've got to find a way to convert that and make that more accessible. But a great Purdue team, and then a great Iowa team with Kingsbury, Woolridge, and all of those folks.
I love it. I love it. Thank you for sharing. That is great. We're going to track that down one way or another. That's like it sounds like your Rudy moment, kind of. I don't know.
It was big, and something that still makes me smile, as you can tell today.
I love it. Thank you for sharing. And then help me understand, given the mentorship, MBA, working at Wake Forest, working at Memphis, on that sort of path where you might say at that stage in your career, yeah, you're following what Bowlesby wrote for you on that notepad, and you are on the path to maybe sitting in his seat someday. And then what happened?
Yeah, so went to Wake Forest, spent 18 months in Memphis, but then went to work for two great guys in Knoxville, Tennessee, John Curry, who's now the athletic director at Wake Forest, and Mike Hamilton, who went on to be the athletic director at Tennessee, and then been with Learfield Sports, Playfly, and those organizations. Those guys were incredible mentors to me during my athletic administration career. They looked out for me. They advanced my career. They coached me. They pushed me, and they're great people. I still talk to John quite a bit. I text with Mike, but true story, I was working my butt off for them, but I was praying, Brent, that I needed a change, and I did not know what that change was. And for 3 years, I knew that what I was doing wasn't where I wanted to be 5 or 10 years from now, but I didn't know what that change would be.
Well, why were you feeling that? What about it? Because you also had such clarity earlier that was where you wanted to be. Now you're in it and you're realizing, oh man, this is not how I thought I would feel. How are you feeling and why?
Yeah, I think, Brent, the main reason, I joked about this so much, but my neighbors thought I had the greatest job in the world. Philip Fulmer, Pat Summitt, and Bruce Pearl would call. So it was publicly, it was a great job, right? At a guy's house having a beer, no one wanted to talk about their job more than talk about mine. But I also knew I was exhausted. I was working every home and away football game, basketball game, and I was running myself into the ground. And I was just starting my family, and I just didn't think I could do it all. And I knew I needed a change, but my identity had been sports for so long that I didn't know how to make that change. And so, true story, the university vice president, Henry Nimsick, another person who was great to me in my career, calls me and says, I'm going to hire a campaign director. Come see me Monday. I'm going to hire you as the campaign director. Come see me Monday at 8. And he hung up on me. And Brent, I walked into his office and he said, so are you going to take the job? And I said, Henry, I don't know what the job is. And he says, campaign director. Henry, I don't know what that means. He goes, you'll be great. I appreciate that, Henry, but I don't know what it means. Well, if you do it, you'll replace me at Tennessee as vice president. Great, Henry, but I didn't know I wanted to do that.
And at this point, I mean, you've clearly had some interaction with advancement and you've had to collaborate on things. So you kind of know what it is, even if it's not your core day to day, but that doesn't mean you actually know what a campaign is or what a campaign director is.
Right. I was knocking out the biggest gifts for athletics with John and Mike. And what Henry saw was, hey, here was a guy with a ton of energy and great connections and a gift closer, right? A guy, often one of the things I tell people that talk about how do I advance in my career, be excellent, right? Stand out with your performance. It's not about climbing the ladder. It's about having a huge impact. And he saw me as one of the best fundraisers on campus.
So let me hit pause on that. What did he see in you? What specifically, either the daily activity, the motor? I mean, it's the equivalent of like, he's in the gym early, he's in the gym late, and he's producing, in the games. Like what do you think he saw specifically that would have distinguished you relative to a whole bunch of other folks on campus?
Yeah, I think what he saw, Brent, was a guy on his team that was relentless at gift closures, that was relentless at building relationships, staying connected. I never let the minutia of what was happening during the day distract me from making the outbound calls. I prioritized the donor visits over the internal meetings. And so when he looked at it, he was new. He'd been there less than 6 months. He went out and saw our top donors, and they all talked about their relationship with me and the gifts they were working on with me, right? Like I was having that sort of impact on the university.
So what is the difference between prioritizing the gift closure, making time for the calls, and not at the same level? Like day in the life of Scott versus a day in the life of somebody who maybe didn't stand out in the same way or didn't produce in the same way? Because I suspect it's sort of the compound effect of daily habits that really leads to the relationship, the revenue, the outperformance that are actually probably pretty simple to write down on a sheet of paper. Doesn't mean it's easy to stay disciplined about those actions.
Yeah. I think the difference between the people that are excelling and the people that aren't isn't necessarily the difference between hard work and not working. Like I think people that are working extremely hard, I'm just not sure if they're working in the right direction. In higher ed, there's an unbelievable number of things to do, but there's only certain things that will help you achieve your financial goals. And that's what philanthropy, that's what advancement shops are built to do, right? Is to raise the kind of money that advances our student experience and our faculty experience. And so in today's job, right, I have polls in every direction, but I have to prioritize the conversations with the top 25 to 50 donors at USC. But I have to model that for my other team members too. And I have to celebrate it when they do that. And so it's not a matter of did somebody work hard, but it's a matter of prioritizing those visits that can have the biggest ROI.
That is so well said. And we recently have hosted Greg Willems on the podcast and John Morris previously. And they always have this expression where they just say, look, like your job is to book visits, conduct visits, and follow up on visits. And if you just do those three things and ideally say no to almost everything else, you are going to likely outperform in a big way because of the distraction factor you just described. And I think there are some people, they embrace that, they excel. I think there are others who maybe actually want the distractions, want the excuses, want to be added to that committee or this meeting to talk about that internal policy, because that's easier than making calls.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I
yeah,
talk all the time, Brent, here is that I have no concern about our ability to administer and manage our programs. And we can make some pivots and be more strategic. I have all sorts of concerns about who is our biggest rainmakers and who wants to be the person to help us close more gifts at $1 million, 5 million, 10 million, because that's where we start to really have an outsized impact on our student experience.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, that's the leverage. That's the impact. And so presumably you said yes to the campaign director job and then ended up in his seat.
I did. I did not know. I'll be honest with you. I left his office still with a lack of clarity, but he offered me a pay raise, and I said I've been praying for a change. I went home and told my wife we got a pay raise and we don't move, and I've got a new challenge. And it was the best thing for me, Brent. I had a great 7 years there on the university side, raising money, working for a great university chancellor in Jimmy Cheek. Special man, another guy that I learned a lot about from a leadership perspective, mentored me, supported me, and that was a great run. And then UT Austin came calling.
Can I just ask, growing up in the athletics lane and then moving into advancement leadership is relatively rare, not never, but pretty rare. And it does make me wonder if that allowed for a different level of collaboration or even data sharing. I mean, literally my call before this recording was with a Power 5 advancement leader who was just commenting that they have their first football game tonight and they sold a whole bunch of single game tickets to their alumni. And he has no idea the top 500 people that are going to be in their stadium tonight that should be getting the kind of personalized attention that could lead to philanthropy. So it was just a real time this morning, but I hear it time and again that there can be such a disconnect. They're selling tickets, they're selling suites, we're selling impact and philanthropy. And maybe we have like some flag in our CRM that shows who's who, but there is just not the kind of coordination that there could be. Did you make some of that happen at Tennessee, just given your origins?
I think to a certain degree, but I think also gave a perspective that a donor makes gifts for different purposes, right? Some donors want access. Some donors want access to university leaders. Some donors want big tax breaks. Some donors want to see something named. Some donors are interested really in students or research. And we need to understand where the donor is and not make an assumption that, hey, I know Brent, he graduated from the engineering school, so that's where he wants to give. That may not be the true story. And we have to be able to think about it in a wider context of, Brent may want football tickets because he may want to entertain his grandkids. He may want to have a skybox for that, but he may really care about cancer research or the arts or engineering. We don't know, but we've got to go learn about Brent and go have that conversation. And so I think that's part of what I tried to bring was not jealousy that athletics can sell suites or tickets, but understanding we got to go meet the donors where they are, learn their interests, and connect them to a university. Athletic giving is the loudest giving on a campus, but on a place like Tennessee, Texas, and USC, it's 10 to 25% of the total number, but people believe it's 50%, 100% of the number, right? But it's 10 to 25%. It's the loudest. The most beautiful thing I think about great football games that people underestimate is when Tennessee's playing Alabama or Texas is playing USC or whatever it is, the people that come on those campuses on that Friday and Saturday love those institutions. They have a connection. How do we leverage that? So 2 weeks later, we're having a gift conversation with them.
Totally.
We know what they want. We had a great, I think it was Texas, Alabama a year ago. And we had the owner of the Falcons at the game, the owner of the Dodgers at the game. Like it was absolutely incredible who all was there. So the question to the team wasn't, do they have great seats for the game? The question is, do they love what we're doing in supply chain? Do they love what we're doing in research around stuttering? And how do we advance that 30 days later into a conversation that might change the lives of people on our campus and in society?
Well, in a certain regard, you're highlighting the opportunity to better connect engagement and philanthropy. I mean, it could be, the 25th college reunion where people at a small liberal arts college in Massachusetts all show up and reconnect and have an amazing time. And then they show up for their 30th reunion and there was no follow up in between. It's how do we go from I care,
Yep.
and yeah, I may be here because it's primarily social and I want to, live the nostalgia and so forth, but it's also a chance to reflect about why I care, how this has been a part of my life and my community. And the difference is usually just the follow up. How do we go from they bought a ticket, they came to the game, they had a great time, and we followed up. They came to reunion and we followed up. And I mean, it's no different with our business. It's like if we go to a case conference and hope that somebody then shows up at our website and says, hey, please, I'd like to talk to the sales team. Not going to happen. It's about consistent follow up over a multi-year period. And that, whether it's general engagement activities or athletics, does still seem like just a massive opportunity in the space. We probably get it right at the principal gift level more often than not, but much below that, I would question it.
Brent, I think you're right. I think what is true, authentic engagement in higher education today? That's one of those questions I think we're all working on. So much of our engagement is around certain things our alumni associations have traditionally done and sports. How many of our alums does that leave out? That while they love the Trojans, that's just not where their interest is to go give up 4 to 8 hours on a Saturday. And so thinking about how we start to use technology, how we start to be more strategic around what true engagement looks like, and then how that connects to philanthropy. Because what we know is it doesn't necessarily always start at philanthropy. There has to be some relationship, belief, confidence, trust, and then philanthropy comes. While we do it well at the principal gifts level, I think we miss a ton of principal gift prospects because we move too fast through it.
Interesting. And so the decision to move to UT Austin, that's a big move for your family. You've got deep roots in Tennessee at that point, but it was a great opportunity. And I know that you had a good run there. What are some of the highlights you've just shared? Maybe a key memory there, but just some of the things you're most proud of, non-sports related, to your point you just made when you think about the advancement enterprise before and after experience.
Yeah, one of the great things, Greg Finvis was the president that hired me there. Brent, what he said to the deans before I arrived, he said, we've hired somebody that knows how to run an advancement program, and we're all going to get behind him. And I need everybody in line with Scott. Give this guy a chance to do it. And so he created alignment from the get-go. And the people at the University of Texas, part of Texas Development, are just outstanding. Still guys and gals that I miss today. Just really, really good people. And not everything that we brought to the table was comfortable. We talked a lot about change is bumpy and it's hard. But to achieve the kind of results, we had to go through change and growth. And they accepted that. Not all the change was smooth, but it worked out extremely well. Brent, in 4 years, we went from Texas averaging 330 million to putting up a couple years in a row at 700 million. I left in February. Their number this year is going to be over 700 million again. That's a fine running machine there. They've got it, and David Livingston's going to do a fantastic job. I'll tell you one thing that I loved about what we did at the University of Texas with Walt Edwards and a number of other folks. We established a program called the Go Bigger Awards, and we asked team members to nominate who they thought were our high performers. And then we had a staff meeting that was all about acknowledging, we'd like to recognize Susan Goddard. And I would read, or somebody else would read a couple things from the nominations, and everybody would yell and scream for Susan Goddard. And we did that for 40 team members every year. The Go Bigger Awards was my favorite day in Austin, Texas each year.
I love it. Everybody listening, if you're an individual contributor, you should suggest this. If you're a leader, you should embrace it. I'll tell you, we just rolled out something similar. Scott, we call it our Thank Awards. Our values at Evertrue are team first, humbly confident, action-oriented, nimble, and kindly candid, spells thank. And we accept nominations, and it is so fun to see really how folks are advocating for their teammates and highlighting the unsung activities that really lead to success. And I love your version of that, and I would encourage everybody. It's just such a baseline cultural thing to celebrate. Very easy not to do, also very, very easy to do.
Yeah.
And so let's say that I were with you in person and I handed you a notebook and I said, hey, Scott, going from 300 million a year to 700 million a year is really aspirational. Show me the path. Or it's 30 to 70, or it's 3 to 7, or it's 300,000 going to 700,000. Ignore if you're listening and you're thinking 300 million, that's more than, we'll raise in a decade. That's okay. What are the common themes? What would you write down on that sheet of paper if I asked you to help give me a path to that kind of growth?
Yeah, a couple of things that we talked a lot about. So one was we had to talk about what we needed to spend our time on, but also what we needed to say we were no longer going to do. And that's the hardest thing for leaders. That's the hardest thing for people leading divisions. We're not going to do that anymore, because time is the most precious asset we have of our team members. We can't just say, get on the treadmill, run harder, run faster, run longer. It does not work that way. So it's about, what are we going to do that's going to help change the impact for our students, our faculty, and our programs, but also what are we going to put to the side? And that's a constant tension point, because it's not that those weren't good ideas. It's just they weren't as good as the other ones to help us have an impact. And so thinking about what you do and what you don't do, building on that theme that our team members' time is their most important asset that we have, is challenging. Are our gift officers seeing the right people or the people they want to see? And that was a big shift we had to think about, who do we need these gift officers to go see versus who are they seeing right now? Because we had a lot of people at the time, I think, in Texas managing people's relationships, but they weren't necessarily the relationships that we needed to be in. And so those were some of the big shifts that I think we made. But also just really embracing where are we at on our journey to have a huge impact. And we talked there a lot about having the best fundraising program in public higher education. Texas, one of the great things about it is there's no place with more ambition, maybe a place that some might say it's audaciousness. And why not Texas was kind of the conversation, right? Like, I joked at Texas, if you said you wanted to be good, we should fire you. Because Texas's whole ethos is about being great, about being ambitious, audacious. And that's what I loved about the Go Bigger culture that we built.
I love that. And so presumably the main reason that you pursued the opportunity at USC is because you are a lifelong Lakers fan. Is that right?
I did grow up with Showtime, Magic Johnson, James Worthy, Byron Scott, Kurt Rambis, all of that. All of that was my mid-'80s childhood, no doubt.
But in all seriousness, especially at this level, you're leading one of the elite public advancement programs in the country. How does it happen, Scott? Are you looking, or are they looking? I mean, just what can you tell me about how something like this comes together? And just as a point of reference, you're kind of rounding the corner here soon on your first year in the seat. So I'm sure it's all still very fresh and you're learning a ton, but would love to know a little bit more about what led to that opportunity and, first impressions.
Yeah. Yeah. So, in true story, I've been blessed in so many ways. My entire life has been, I've been so fortunate. And a year ago, I brought my family out to California to escape the Texas heat for a few days. And we went to a Dodgers game and we walked campus. And my kids teased me while we walked this campus that, Dad, this wouldn't be a bad place to live and work. And I kind of laughed at it, didn't think anything of it. They're high school age. They're not going to want to move. And at the time, I didn't even really think about USC and that Al Checchio had been gone. And Carol Folk calls at the end of September and wants to have a couple conversations. And the job was exciting. I think.
So you're saying she calls completely independent and coincidentally from your Dodgers campus walk?
Right. So the campus walk was July when my kids teased me. She calls at the end of September. And, what I heard her talk about around her vision for healthcare, frontiers of computing, and then and then this incredible campus like Texas, it has so many strengths. But this is a campus where all of the opportunities that LA presents, that this university presents, I was excited about her vision, and I really sat there and said, this is a special place, and it was hard to say I might leave the team at Texas. That was really hard. But also, in true fairness, I think my wife came out here initially in November and said, I'll take USC's trip to come out and look at houses, but I don't think we're moving out here. Because she gets on the plane and she says to me, she goes, Scott, I don't know what the job's going to be like, but you need to find a way to say yes. And my family was great. They were excited about it, and they've really embraced it. They've looked at it as the next chapter. And what I've come to realize is living in LA is pretty special. I understand why so many people have moved out this direction. The weather's great. The people are great. The Trojan family is really strong. And I knew that, it was a big school. I knew that it had passion. I've now started to really understand that the passion's even stronger than I realized. I thought about it in the context of the number one producer of Olympic talent. So when you think about all the Olympics, USC is the number one producer of that. Also the number one producer of Academy Awards, computer science grads, business degrees, number two in health degrees, unbelievable health facilities and physicians that are just getting up and going. And as you can tell, I just got more and more excited about this opportunity.
Well, I love it, and congratulations. And it's amazing when the stars align. And obviously, there's a lot of luck is compounded with the track record and the kind of mentorship that you've described for sure. And but the coincidence of your family trip that's crazy to me. I got to say, one of the most exciting announcements. I track a lot of gifts and funding and what's going on campus as I'm trying to stay connected to the rapidly evolving landscape. One of my favorite announcements that I've read, and I don't want to put you on the spot too much because it's a big university, you got a lot going on, but there was an announcement in March that was really led by President Folt around this idea of a Center for Generative AI in Society. And March was just a few months after ChatGPT was publicly released, and it seems like years ago at this point, just given how fast this space is changing. But one of the things I loved about the announcement wasn't just the topic, but the way that different deans in a cross-functional manner were showcased. Having Dean Bay, who leads the Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism, and Dean Daly, who is focused on cinematic arts, and having professors that were focused on different disciplines, all sort of coming together, putting a stake in the ground around USC wanting to play a leadership role in what I believe is going to be the sort of transformative technology wave of our time, and how that's going to impact all parts of business and society. It was a really, really cool announcement. I don't know what level of familiarity you have with it, but I'd love to just get your reaction to that.
Yeah, well, I think first I would give a lot of credit to Dr. Folt to be, one of the first leaders to really step out and say, our university is going to tackle this. We're not going to stand on the sidelines and say we're fearful of what's going to happen with ChatGPT and technology, but instead we're going to take the experts that we have in the schools you mentioned, cinematic arts, one of the best in the country, Annenberg around our media, communications, and journalism, one of the best in higher education, our engineering school. We're going to pull our resources together and we're going to be leaders. And that was her command, if you will. That was her vision from the very start, that we're going to pool our resources and solve society's problems. Generative AI is one of the most interesting ones that we have right now. And so, out here with Hollywood and those sort of things, the arts, the impact of generative AI is one that everybody is talking about. You can think about it from a media perspective. You can think about it from an arts and a creative, and who owns the patent rights on the technology or on the creativeness. All of that, Brent, is so critical, and we have the leaders that do it. And the beautiful thing I think about USC is it's a campus that's more entrepreneurial than a big public institution. That's just in its ethos, is to be more entrepreneurial, to break down silos, to work together. really the gaming industry in a lot of ways ties its roots back to our cinematic arts school and our engineering school 20 years ago, faculty working on improving the technology for things like VR, and what we call now USC games. And so that interdisciplinary work, that breaking down silos, that entrepreneurial spirit is part of what makes USC special and why we can lead under Dr. Folt's leadership.
Well, I love it because I think there's a lot of trepidation in higher education in general around AI right now, especially at the intersection of ethics, cheating, student, policies. It's really hard.
Yeah.
But it's here and it's not going back. And so it's, it's really a lead, follow, or get out of the way kind of moment. You all are clearly trying to lead. And even as it relates to advancement, we just see massive implications. There's so much data that we've been sitting on in the sector that we can think, that now can be synthesized instantly. By synthesizing that data, you know more about Scott or Brent or a given donor. So the outreach can be more personalized, which leads to a higher response rate, which leads to a better visit, which should have an even better, faster contact report because now you don't got to start from scratch every single time. And so they're just every industry, every sector is going to have to be reimagined as this technology matures, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And the challenge for us in higher ed is as a general group, we're risk averse, right? We're not willing to take risks. We sit back, we watch, and we're typically following in areas of technology 10, 15 years later than everybody else, right? If you look at our CRMs compared to what industry uses, if you think about technology, but yet the leaders at the forefront of technology are on our campuses. One of the first papers written on ChatGPT was by 2 USC engineering faculty members. Like, this is where the conversations are happening, yet we in our industry are risk averse. We stay on the sidelines too long. The interesting thing will be over the next 10 years, what universities really take advantage of how they engage their alumni and friends through technology. For us, healthcare is a huge part of our future fundraising priorities. Think about all the wealth within 100 miles of USC's campus. How can we connect with them in a meaningful way about the research we do in Alzheimer's? We have some of the absolute stars of Alzheimer's research. We need the people that are passionate about that to know about it. We have a faculty member that is working on a project that he is 100% confident is going to restore sight to those that have lost it. Restoring vision to those that have lost it, there's not a more powerful statement you'll hear today. We need to make sure people understand that, and we can use technology to understand who might be interested, how they respond, how we follow up.
I love it. I think one of the things you're highlighting is, again, just how much amazing work is happening on college campuses that even as a leader, being able to reference the things you've just referenced, there are 100 other faculty members, 100 other specific types of research happening that you couldn't possibly know all of that as any given individual. And so even the thought of how do we leverage these large language models to even know what's happening all over campus, so that if I'm in a meeting with somebody after the football suite and they mention that vision is something that has impacted their family, where do I go to quickly and just know that? Because there have to be, just the knowledge transfer and sharing within an advancement organization. I think about it, I'm like, if I were a new gift officer at one of these institutions, how would I possibly learn enough to go an inch deep and a mile wide with any given donor on any given Sunday? It's kind of amazing to think about just how much is happening. And I don't envy fundraisers that are trying to piece that together, but I am hopeful that these kinds of technologies might be able to make that a little more straightforward.
Yeah. I'm really hopeful that we can embrace technology and try to be more on the leading front towards industry than so far behind as we have traditionally been.
Well said. All right. Well, I know we're kind of at time. It's Labor Day weekend right around the corner here. Closing thoughts. I've got 2 final questions. One, you've been on a lot of trips. All right. A lot of gift conversations in a lot of places. Single most memorable trip you've been on, whether it went extremely well or it was a complete fiasco, anything goes here. Any trips really stand out?
Yeah. One trip that was an absolute disaster I'll never forget. I was early in my leadership career at Tennessee, and we thought we had a really important donor we needed to go see. We wanted to take the chancellor and the dean. We chartered a plane. Weather was bad, so short answer is it only ended up being me and the gift officer getting on the plane. The chartered plane flew for 4 hours from Tennessee, could not get past the storm, and landed in Oklahoma. And we got off, we ate barbecue, and flew back home. And I remember I spent $15,000 on a private plane to go eat barbecue in Oklahoma and not talk about a gift. And to this day, I learned that I made that trip way too complex. It would have been easy to go see the donor. We got the gift. He was a great donor for the University of Tennessee, but I tried to line up way too many calendars, make it too special, and it was a real humbling moment for me. I remember sitting at the FBO before we took off having a beer, and I don't drink that much, but I really needed to calm my nerves because I thought I'd cost myself my job. And that was an absolute train wreck of a conversation, and Dorothy Bryson will remember that story well.
Well, I want everybody listening to first and foremost appreciate Scott's candor, because that's the reality. That stuff happens. Mistakes are made. You got to shoot shots once in a while. You don't always make them. But it's the compound effect of getting it right, getting it wrong, and hopefully getting it right more often than not. Thanks for the candor. I hope the barbecue and the beer were good, though.
It was just $15,000 for a flight to Oklahoma. They've got good barbecue, but it's not worth a private flight.
Last question: since moving to Pasadena with, if I'm not mistaken, the five S's family, 4 kids and another.
So 6 of us, we all have the same initials, SAR. So it's Scott, Sarah, Spencer, Sam, Saniyat, and Suri. Yep.
So what has been the favorite family memory for Scott, Sarah, Spencer, Sam, Saniyat, and Suri since you've made the move to California?
We've had some really special ones. As a family of 6, we haven't been to a USC sporting event yet. But we went to a Dodgers game, and we had pretty good tickets. And I think getting all in on the Dodgers. I'm a big Joe Kelly fan. Love it when he comes out of the bullpen. My kids love the bobbleheads. And the other night we went on Fernando Valenzuela night. And if you've ever been to LA, they love Fernando Valenzuela. And for me, 84, I think it was 84. He had to be pretty dominant pitcher at mid 80s when I was growing up. And so to see him be honored, get his bobblehead, and watch the Dodgers win was a pretty fun night. That's a great place to go watch professional baseball.
Well, those are some of my peak baseball card collecting years. So I got plenty of Fernando Valenzuela's in the closet for sure back in Postville. So, hey, Scott, I knew it was going to be fun. Thank you so much. I am really happy for you and the family, and look forward to continuing to get to know you, and hope you have some stellar athletic experiences here as things ramp up this fall.
Great. Brent, great to see you. Come see us in Los Angeles. All right.
I'm going to make that happen. Hey, with that, I'm going to close today's episode. Thanks, everybody. Signing off with Scott Rabenold, who serves as Senior Vice President for University Advancement at the University of Southern California. Take care, everybody.